obligations. No worries. We've got that one covered. We'll come back to that one. You know, we're going to get there in 2050. So what we have is an interesting situation where we're going to have an interesting confluence of events. The very day, and this, by the way, you can set your watch by, the very day that we have to report capital adequacy. And remember, capital adequacy is whether or not I have enough cash to back the credit I just gave you. You wanted $20, I gave you $20, but you told me that you had the ability to repay it. I, as the credit extender, had the ability to set that aside and sequester it and make sure that I could perform and let out the right amount of capital and retain the right amount of capital to make sure I could stay solvent. And long about January 2008, we will have something on the order of 27 to 28% of the market that's allegedly mortgage-backed securities supported by credit card debt. They're basically the same, right? Debt's debt, right? Now, I think I established earlier in this presentation, debt isn't debt. Mortgage, 30-year mortgage debt, and debt, I feel like going to spend more money at Christmas debt, isn't the same. So, pray tell, how does a financial institution in the United States and Europe actually tell the market what their intangible exposure is when they're calling something mortgage and it isn't mortgage? And let's say you were off by 25%. Little tiny window. There is not a single bank in the United States that could handle a 25% loss reserve call. Not one. Not one. That's where Islamic finance becomes very interesting. Wouldn't it be funny to be standing in 2006 and say that the people that way too many of us hate might actually be our only salvation? Wouldn't that be a hoot? Wouldn't it be a hoot to actually realize that the one entity that we spend more time as Americans despising could actually have the capital adequacy that is required to prop up the capital inadequacy of our financial institutions? Oh, holy crap, wouldn't that be funny? Wouldn't that be funny? But let's play the tape on that one, because it stops being funny and it starts having profound implications if you stop and think about it. And here, I am dead serious. Over the next 3 quarters, we will pump, literally, no pun intended, a lot more cash into the Middle East. With oil at the price it's going, with natural gas at the price that it's going, even if oil starts to stabilize, as many of the analysts on Wall Street tell us it will do, and prices will start falling at the pump a year from now. Well, after all, it's an election coming up. We have to get the prices falling at the pump, or God knows what could happen. So, if we get to that horizon and oil starts to fall, we will have pumped about $1.7 trillion of additional liquidity into the region. That will add to the $1.3 trillion estimate from this past year. And that's of excess liquidity. That's of cash. That sounds like a number that comes dangerously close to the capital insufficiency of the credit we extended last year. which will be the capital adequacy requirement that we will need to make sure our banking system stays up and running. I'm going to do something which is really mean right now. How many of you know what a sukuk is? There are 2 people who raised their hand. Good. I'm hoping that some of you are just shy. I'm going to ask you again. How many of you know what a sukuk is? Raise your hand high. High, high, high. You will be the proudest people for raising your hand if you know what it is. Because by 2008, that term will be much, much, much more familiar to all of us. Why? Because that's how you build Islamic compliant financial vehicles to do financing of long-term credit obligations. And guess what? The country that actually has the most liquid market for sukuks is the United Arab Emirates. The city and the emirate that has the most liquid market for those securities is Dubai. The first Dubai sukuk in excess of $1 billion was issued to a company called P&O. Come on, people. Work with me here. Port Authority. Oh, crap. We did, didn't we? Oh, man, my whole idea just fell apart. Because I thought we could go to Dubai and say, guys, help us. I thought we could go there and say, but we've been your allies. We've worked with you. You've been an alliance of the willing in the war on terror. And the same company that has the security contract from the United States Navy to safeguard our vessels in the Persian Gulf. Oh, hold on a second. I did say that right, didn't I? The same company that has the contract with the U.S. Navy to safeguard our vessels in the placid, tranquil Persian Gulf, where nothing bad ever happens and everybody sings Pirates of the Caribbean songs. That same company that our government has hired to protect our Navy was not stable enough to unload stuffed animals in the New York port because they may be terrorists. But no worries there. When we asked the Dubai financial markets to support our collapsing banking system in 2008, I'm sure that they'll forget about it. And the comic irony is I think they will. I know a lot of people there. I work with a lot of people there. And you know the cool thing about Dubai is they're thick-skinned traders. Traders. T-R-A-D-E-R-S. Traders. They're people who understand that sometimes, in the interest of keeping your economy alive, you actually had to service pirate ships. In fact, the Dubai Creek, for those of you who don't know history, was where the pirate ships went to be remasted, rewatered, refed, rearmed for a long time, including 1815. As a matter of fact, the Dubai Port Authority in 1815 was actually supplying Napoleonic and British ships. Damn it, I love when a story comes all together. I love when you take something from 1815 and cram it through a bunch of bad analogies and have it come out the other end, still in 1815. That's just fun. That's the part that I love. It's fun. So where do we go? Where do we go when we realize that we need to learn something? You realize that you can't just show up when you're Morgan Stanley or you're Lehman or you're, any of the other banks, and you can't knock on the door at the DIFX and say, we got a world of hurt here, and we'd really like your help, and we just realized that we were about to report our financial statement under Basel II, but we can't be compliant because mortgage isn't mortgage and it's consumer credit and everybody's defaulting and it doesn't look good for us. You can't just knock on a door and go, help us. Not because they don't want to help. It's because you have to sit down with people who you might not understand. You have to sit down and have dialogues with people who you might not share common values. And you might have to get expediency pushed aside and sit down and understand that Sharia finance law isn't just calling credit by another name. It isn't. You actually have to pay attention to a culture and to a religion and to a system that doesn't play entirely by our rules. And you have to smile about it because you're asking somebody to help you. You have to sit across the table from people who are saying things that don't make sense. You have to say, do you realize that the very consumerism that you railed against as Islamic mainstream cultural rejection of certain Western practices is what got us into the trouble that we're asking you to help us out of? We get pissed off when we hear some cleric say, well, Western consumerism is bad. Did it ever occur to us that maybe they're right? Maybe there was something to that. And by the way, I'm not advocating that all of us change anything about our persuasion. I'm simply saying, would it be interesting if we actually were able to tolerate the hypothesis for a second that there might be some granule of truth in what makes us slightly uncomfortable. And if we could merely cross over that threshold, we may be in a position in February of 2008, in March of 2008, to sit down and have conversations and not go, my gosh, I don't know what these people are talking about. Might it be a good idea for 50 people in Arlington today to start inquiring? What is a sukuk? What is Sharia finance? How would one aggregate 1.7 trillion or 3.4 trillion into a pool that could be used to enhance the credit indebtedness of our banking system?
Let him in a trade from him.
Maybe. So, 2008, January 2008, we're there. And I'm wrong. The wheels were set in motion a long time ago. Because the one other hypothesis is, we say, the rules don't apply. There is a country that's pretty large. It has people who actually have been around a few thousand years longer than we've been around. That very large country made a strategic decision a while ago to start buying our treasuries. And